You're sitting at your desk on a Tuesday morning, checking your savings account like you do every week, and the number finally reads $40,127. You screenshot it, you stare at it. You close the app and open it again to make sure it's real. For 3 years, you've been transferring money, skipping trips, driving the old car, and now you've actually done it. You've saved $40,000, and you feel different. Not rich, not ready to buy tomorrow, but different. Because suddenly the Zillow browsing isn't fantasy anymore. When you filter for homes, you're not looking at what you wish existed. You're looking at what might actually be possible in 8 months, maybe six, if you stay aggressive. The realtor who never returned your inquiry last year, she responds within 2 hours now. Your parents stop asking, when are you going to buy with that judgmental edge and start asking, what neighborhoods are you considering? Like you're a real person with real options. Here's what actually changes when you cross $40,000 in savings. It's not that you can suddenly afford luxury, it's that you've crossed from theoretically interested to financially credible in a system that gates access through down payment capacity. And you know exactly this feeling, the mixed emotion of pride in saving combined with terror about what comes next. Because now you have to figure out what $40,000 actually unlocks, what it doesn't, and whether the next 12 months turn this achievement into a home or a cautionary tale. Let me show you the fundamental calculation that realtors assume you already understand. $40,000 represents either 20% down on a $200,000 property, which is conventional wisdom that avoids PMI, or 10% down on a $400,000 property, which is riskier, includes PMI, but accessible in many markets. Both scenarios produce completely different outcomes depending on where you live. In Pittsburgh or Cleveland, $40,000 gets you 20% down with reserves left over. In Denver or Austin, it gets you 10% down with barely any cushion for what comes next. You're operating at the edge of feasibility, not the center of comfort. But here's what realtors won't tell you about why they suddenly return your calls at $40,000 but ignored you at $25,000. The industry has a credibility threshold, and it sits right around $35,000 to $40,000. Below that number, your educational outreach, a potential future client they'll nurture with market updates and open house invitations. Above that number, you're a closable transaction within 90 to 120 days. Lenders don't care about your $25,000 savings account because financing isn't possible in actual market conditions at that level. But at 40,000, now we can talk pre-approval, letters, rate locks, and closing timelines. You've become real to them because you represent commission opportunity that can materialize this quarter. Here's what happens the moment you cross that threshold. You get three transformations simultaneously, and they happen fast. First, lender pre-approval becomes real. You move from maybe $180,000 estimates based on income alone to here's your actual $220,000 approval with rate lock and specific terms. You're holding a document that says a bank will give you money, which changes how you think about yourself. Second, realtors shift from educational mode to sales mode. The questions change from what are you looking for generally to how soon can you view properties this weekend. You represent a deal they can close before summer, and their behavior reflects that timeline pressure. Third, sellers and listing agents see your offers differently. A $40,000 down payment signals seriousness that $15,000 never could, even if your actual offer price is identical. You're not a tire kicker. You're a buyer who can actually close. But here's the darker transformation nobody mentions. You're also now in the extractable income zone. Every professional in the transaction starts calculating their cut. Mortgage brokers, insurance agents, title companies, home warranty salespeople, HOA properties. You've become a commission opportunity, and the advice you receive will increasingly reflect what closes deals, not what protects your future. The incentives have shifted, and you need to understand that before you start taking recommendations about maximum purchase price or minimum down payment percentages. Let me show you what this looks like with actual people making actual decisions. Meet Sarah and James. Sarah is 31, a teacher making $52,000 annually. James is 33, works in IT support, makes $61,000 combined. Household income of $113,000, which puts them well above the median in most markets. They just hit $42,000 in savings after 4 years of aggressive transfers and lifestyle restriction. They're looking at a $310,000 townhouse in a second-tier market suburb. Everything about this should work. Right. Solid income, substantial savings, reasonable property for the area. Watch what happens when we actually run their numbers. Their mortgage with 10% down means $279,000 financed at 6.8% interest. That's $1,830 monthly. Property tax in their county runs $465 monthly. Homeowners insurance is $185. The HOA fee for the townhouse community is $280. PMI, because they're under 20% down, adds $155. Utilities including electric, gas, water, and trash average $240. And here's the line nobody mentions in pre-approval conversations. Maintenance reserve. At 1% of home value annually, that's $258 monthly, they need to set aside for the inevitable repairs, replacements, and emergencies that come with ownership. Add it up. $3,413 monthly for housing. Now let's look at what they're actually working with. Combined gross income of $113,000 sounds substantial until you calculate take home after federal tax, state tax, Social Security, Medicare, and health insurance premiums. They're bringing home approximately $7,200 monthly. After housing, $3,787 remains. Car payments for both vehicles, $640. Car insurance, $195. Gas, $220. Groceries for two people, $650. Student loans, $430. Phone bill, $130. Internet, $80. 5. Health insurance premiums not covered by employer, $280. Basic discretionary spending for clothing, personal care, and minimal entertainment, $400. They now have $777 left monthly for everything else. Emergency savings rebuild, retirement contributions beyond employer match, any unexpected expenses, any quality of life spending beyond basics, any gift giving, any travel, any hobbies, anything. Here's what that number actually means. They can afford this house the same way you can afford to run a marathon after not training. Technically possible, but you'll suffer the entire time, and one unexpected obstacle ends you. $777 is less than what they were saving monthly before buying. They've worked for 4 years to build capital, and the act of deploying that capital eliminates their ability to keep building it. Look at that number. Really look at it. That's their margin for every car. Repair, every medical copay, every wedding gift, every pet emergency, every single thing that isn't already listed in those fixed expenses. And we haven't even mentioned what happens when the HVAC fails or the roof needs replacement or the water heater dies at year 3. Here's the pattern that destroys $40,000 savers. And it happens with statistical regularity. They cross the threshold, get pre-approved within 2 weeks, start house hunting within a month, and make an offer within 3 months. Before they understand what ownership actually costs in their specific market. Before they've test budgeted a single month living on post-purchase income, before they've built any additional reserves beyond that initial $40,000. Let me show you the 3 traps that close during this window and why each one is devastating. Trap 1 is maximum pre-approval confusion. Lenders will approve you for 40 to 43% debt to income ratio. That's what the regulations allow, so that's what they offer. But sustainable housing cost is 28 to 30% of gross income. The difference between what you're approved for and what you can actually sustain long term is the difference between appearing financially stable and hemorrhaging money monthly while looking successful. When Sarah and James got approved for $340,000, the lender wasn't asking whether they could thrive at that payment level. The lender was asking whether regulations permit the loan. Those are completely different questions with completely different answers. Trap 2 is down payment depletion. If Sarah and James use $31,000 of their $42,000 for down payment and closing costs, they have $11,000 remaining. That $11,000 has to cover immediate repairs the inspection didn't catch, appliance replacement. If anything dies in year 1, the first property tax bill that comes due, furniture for rooms that are currently empty, emergency fund rebuild for job loss or medical crisis, and every single unexpected expense that materializes in those critical first 12 months. $11,000 sounds like a cushion until you list everything it needs to cushion against. Then it sounds like a timer counting down to credit card debt. Trap 3 is lifestyle cost assumption error. Sarah and James currently rent a two-bedroom apartment for $1,800 monthly, including utilities. They're assuming that paying $3,413 for a townhouse means their lifestyle costs increase by about $1,600 monthly, which feels manageable on paper. But utilities in a standalone structure run $100 to $150 higher than apartment utilities. Maintenance reserve is a completely new category that didn't exist in renting. HOA fees are new. Property tax is new. Every single cost category except the base mortgage payment is either new or higher than their current situation. The lifestyle cost assumption says we'll adjust our discretionary spending to accommodate. The reality is there's almost no discretionary spending left to adjust. Now watch what happens if Sarah and James buy in month 4 versus month 16. Month 4 purchase means they have 11,000 in reserves post-closing. The water heater fails in month 7, costs 2,500 to replace. Their emergency fund drops to 8,500. James's car needs 1,500 in transmission work in month 9. Emergency fund is now 7,000. Sarah has a medical procedure in month 11 with 3,500 in out-of-pocket costs after insurance. Emergency fund is now 3,500. And they're 12 months into ownership with no ability to handle the next surprise. The HVAC system that's 19 years old and running on borrowed time? When that fails, they're going into credit card debt at 22% interest because there's nowhere else to pull the money from. They've entered the trap that turns homeownership into financial quicksand. Month 16 purchase looks completely different. Sarah and James don't buy immediately after hitting 40,000. They keep saving aggressively and add another 16,000 over 12 months. They spend that year test budgeting what ownership would actually feel like, tracking every expense category, running scenarios for different repair costs. They downgrade their target price from 310,000 to 280,000 after realizing the initial property stretched them too thin. When they finally buy in month 16, they have 28,000 in reserves post-closing. Same water heater failure, same transmission repair, same medical procedure. Their emergency fund absorbs all three and still sits at 18,000. When the HVAC fails, they're stressed but not destroyed. They can handle homeownership surprises because they built the foundation to handle them. The difference between month 4 and month 16 purchase is the difference between surviving homeownership and drowning in it. And here's what makes this particularly brutal. Every single professional in the transaction has zero financial incentive to tell you to wait those 12 months. Let's talk about who makes money when Sarah and James buy that $310,000 townhouse. The buyer's agent earns 3% commission, which is $9,300. The mortgage broker earns between $2,500 and $3,500 in origination fees and lender credits. The title company gets their cut. The inspection company gets paid. The appraisal company gets paid. The home warranty company gets their sale. Every single entity in this transaction gets compensated only if the deal closes. Nobody gets paid if Sarah and James say we're going to wait another year to build reserves. Nobody earns commission if they downgrade to a 280,000 property instead of 310. Nobody benefits if they decide to keep renting while they strengthen their financial position. So when the realtor says you'll never feel completely ready, or the mortgage broker says you're approved for 340, so 310 is conservative, or your parents say we bought our first house with way less saved than you have, understand what's actually happening. The realtor earns nothing if you wait. The mortgage broker earns nothing if you buy smaller. Your parents bought their house when the median price was 3 times median income, and yours is 6 times, so their experience is irrelevant to your mathematics. Everyone giving you advice either profits from urgency or doesn't understand current price-to-income ratios. Neither group can tell you the truth you need to hear. Here's the cultural narrative that enables all of this. Renting is throwing money away. Except that narrative ignores maintenance, costs, property tax, interest payments, and the opportunity cost of capital trapped in home equity earning zero return. Home prices only go up. Except that survivor bias from 2012 to 2022, an anomaly period that's already reversing in multiple markets. You'll never feel ready, so just jump in. True, you'll never feel ready emotionally, but that doesn't mean financial readiness is impossible to assess. Conflating emotional readiness with financial readiness is how people end up house poor, stressed, and unable to build wealth despite owning property. But let me reframe what $40,000 actually gives you because this is more powerful than any house. 40,000 doesn't give you a house, it gives you options, timeline control, and negotiating position. Here's the real power you now have. You can wait for the right property instead of settling for the available property because you're desperate. You can include inspection contingencies without fear of losing to cash offers because your financing is solid. You can walk away from bad deals because you're not operating from scarcity. You can negotiate repairs because sellers know you can close. You can choose closing timeline that protects your reserves instead of accommodating everyone else's urgency. This is threshold leverage. Under $30,000, you're a maybe buyer who gets ignored. Over 40,000, you're a real buyer who can make demands. The magic isn't the buying, the magic is the position. And here's what many successful $40,000 savers actually do. They wait 18 to 24 months and end up buying with 60 to 70,000. That additional capital completely changes their ownership experience from stress to stability. They can handle the water heater and the transmission repair and the medical bill without liquidating their emergency fund. They can afford the 310,000 house and still sleep at night because they have 30,000 in reserves instead of 11. Or they buy the 280,000 house with massive reserves and actually enjoy ownership instead of surviving it. Let me give you permission to do something radical. If your household income is under 90,000 and you've saved $40,000, you've accomplished something most Americans never will. You've built substantial capital through sustained discipline. Using it for a down payment isn't mandatory. It's one option among several. Here's what else you can do with that capital. You can keep it invested while continuing to rent in a low-cost situation, which might build more wealth than buying a 280,000 property with 8% maintenance depreciation. You can use 15,000 for career transition that increases your income by 20,000 annually, which changes your entire financial picture more than home ownership would. You can continue saving to 70,000 and buy in a lower cost market where that capital goes further. You can accept that renting might be the superior wealth building strategy for your specific situation. You're not a failure if you choose to keep building instead of buying. You're not missing out if you wait 2 more years. You're not throwing money away by renting. If renting enables you to invest the difference between rent and ownership costs, you cross the threshold that proves you can execute financial discipline. You saved your way to options. Don't let realtors, lenders, family pressure, or Instagram humble brags convince you that the only valid use of $40,000 is immediate down payment. Now use that same discipline to decide what actually serves your life, not what serves the real estate industry's quarterly commission goals. Because here's what nobody tells you. The screenshot moment when your account reads 40,127, that's not the starting gun. That's not permission to sprint into the first property that accepts your offer. That's the moment you've earned the right to be strategic. You've proven you can delay gratification, resist lifestyle inflation, and build capital in an economy designed to extract it. Those skills are rare. Those skills are valuable. Don't waste them by rushing into a purchase that turns your achievement into obligation. The system wants you to buy now because now generates commission. The system doesn't care if you're still financially stressed in 3 years using credit cards to cover repair costs, unable to switch jobs because you're trapped by mortgage payments, or watching your marriage deteriorate under money pressure. The system got paid at closing. Your decade of financial struggle afterward doesn't appear on anyone's balance sheet but yours. So take the $40,000 achievement for what it actually is. Proof that you can execute a long-term financial plan. Leverage that you can deploy strategically when the right opportunity appears. Freedom to negotiate from a position of strength rather than desperation. And most importantly, permission to keep building until the math actually works for your life, not just for the lender's risk models. You saved your way to options. Don't let anyone convince you that the only valid option is the one that pays them commission this quarter.